3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Welcome to the DFP Community Podcast, brought to you by Documentary Family Photographers Worldwide, DFP for short. I'm your host, Heather Whitten. If you're a fan of real, raw, and beautiful moments captured through the lens of family photographers from across the globe, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about showcasing the incredible work of everyday documentary family photographers you might not have heard of yet. Each episode will dive into the stories behind their photography, explore their unique projects, and get to know the people behind the camera. We're here to celebrate their journeys, encourage connection, and remind you that the world is full of inspiring photographers you can learn from and reach out to. So whether you're a seasoned pro, an aspiring photographer, or just someone who loves a good family story, get ready to be inspired, empowered, and connected. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. I'm here today with Chanda Williams, and she is a natural light documentary family photographer and videographer in Atlanta, Georgia. She was drawn to photojournalism in college and became a birth doula in 2010, and then she realized that she could combine her interests. Her birth work quickly expanded to telling family stories. Chanda offers subscription-based documentary family sessions and is also part of the Birth Story Collective, a team of birth photographers from her community working together to make birth work more sustainable. She is a wife and mother of 2 young men and has a dog who thinks she's a human. So, Chanda, what does documentary family photography mean to you?
Oh my gosh, everything. It means life, love, honesty, authenticity. You know, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's the type of art that really means something, truly. I love portraiture. I think there's a place for portraiture, but documentary is the meat of the coconut for me. It's what life is about. The details, the connections.
Yeah, I love that so much. And we see so much of that in your work. So I hope at the end of this episode, we'll let people know where they can find your work, because there's so many of those themes throughout all of your work. That's really beautiful. And I definitely want people to go search you out and find it. What got you started as a professional photographer?
So for me, the doula piece came first. I became a doula in 2010. And I was at births just, seeing these incredible moments of love and power and connection, and realized that I could easily have my camera and start documenting births. So I started doing that, which quickly led to doing maternity for those clients and newborn. And then it just sort of expanded from there. I mean, I've been a photographer my whole life, I think. I was handed a camera at 3 and never stopped taking pictures. But as far as professionally, that was the moment when I was at a birth. The sun was rising over the city behind this water birth, and I was like, oh my God, I need this picture. They need this picture. And so that's how that started. I started offering family photography to my birth clients.
Yeah, wonderful. That's such an organic way for things to start. I think that's really beautiful. And I feel like that impulse of seeing an image and knowing that you can make it for somebody and that they can have it for the rest of their life is so powerful. I think that's something that we can all really relate to, just that drive when you see something to want to capture it.
Yeah. Wanted these new parents, because at that point I did know how hard it is to be a new parent. I wanted these new moms specifically to see what they did. It was like, there was definitely a drive of she needs to see this. This is incredible. And I remember when you're birthing, most people don't remember it, and you absolutely don't see it from the outside. So that was a big driving factor also. She should see this.
Right. Yeah, that's a big driving factor in my own birth work as well. I think that having images that show your strength and power and vulnerability and all of those things is so important and integral to the processing that happens after you give birth. That's really wonderful that you get to be able to do that for people. Mm-hmm. Are you full-time or part-time?
Full-time.
Full time. That's amazing and impressive. I think, I hope a lot of photographers that are listening today are aspiring to be full time. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit. How long has it taken you to get to this point in your career?
Um, well, I think if I started offering family photos in 2010, I would say I probably started pricing appropriately in 2015 or 16 or something like that.
Right.
And then it really was in 2022 when I started doing the subscription model that it felt sustainable.
Okay.
I luckily have a husband whose job offered insurance, so we were able to get by, so it's been full time for me since 2010, really. But 2022 was where it opened up to feel like, okay, this is um, this, I'm actually contributing equally to the family.
That is so inspirational. Like coming from just where I sit right now, I supplement my husband's income, but I'm definitely not contributing equally. So that is so powerful. And yeah, I love that you've gotten to that place. And I think that's something for others that are just getting into this industry or approach to photography to really understand, is that it's not an overnight success story.
Yeah.
That it takes a lot of time and energy and effort to get yourself out there and get your work out there and to find those clients and find the right model that works for you. And we'll talk about some subscriptions in just a minute. But what do you think was the most significant turning point in your growth as a photographer?
Well, two things jump out at me. The first is realizing I didn't have to do cheesy photography, like realizing that documentary is a thing. And, so finding that niche was really important. And then the other thing was coming together as a collective with two other photographers and being able to bounce ideas off of each other, but also take myself seriously through the view of taking them seriously, if that makes sense. So, when one of them says to me, what should I charge for this? It's so easy for me to say, oh my gosh, you need to charge this because of that. And so seeing that made it easier to do for myself, to charge what my time is worth and what my talent is worth.
That's so powerful. I think that we have that inner critic, right? That's always inside of us telling us to do less, be less. We are less than what we deserve or are capable of, or things like that. And so, yeah, I think just being in such close proximity with other photographers, I'm glad that really pushed you to see your own worth and value in this genre.
Yeah. I think it's hard as a photographer because we love what we do, that I'm sure I hope we've all said this, like, oh, I would do it for free, like I want to be at that birth so bad, I would do it for free, which is just insane. And
right.
And I would never support that thought in my collective team. And so, I shouldn't for myself.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your birth collective. So you just kind of spoke to the idea of doing it for free and being there just for the joy of it and the experience of it all. But can you speak a little bit to why it is so important that you're compensated the way that you are for the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I could talk for hours about this, but birth work specifically is hard. For anyone who's done it, then you absolutely know. And for people who haven't done it, I don't even know if you can imagine how hard it is. Like the toll it takes on you emotionally and physically, the toll it takes on your family, just to say like, hey, drop everything. You're now taking care of the kids and I'll be back when I'm back. Yeah. Is pretty hard. Missing kids' birthdays, grandmother's funerals. It's being on call 24/7 is very, very hard. And so I was getting to the point of, I still wanted to do birth photography, but it wasn't making sense anymore for my family. My husband was pretty over it at that point. Uh, and so that's why it was really important to me to find a team and to just
Mm.
figure out a different way of doing this.
Yeah, I love that you pivoted to a collective. Um, let's talk a little bit about that. What does community look like to you?
Mm. Community is essential to me
Mm.
in all aspects of life. So, in hindsight, it's obvious that I went this route to find a community of photographers to work with. I don't know, community, I guess, is the point of this life we're living. It's, family, community, those kind of mean the same thing to me. Um,
Yeah, I love that you found two people to work with that feel like family to you.
and I don't take that lightly. I recognize the impossibility of this, and
Right.
we three birth photographers lived in the same neighborhood in Atlanta.
Wow.
I mean, that's, I think out of like six birth photographers in the city, that's pretty wild.
Yeah, that's kismet. It was meant to be.
Yeah.
Why did you become a birth doula in 2010?
Um, I had my first son in 2005 and loved giving birth. I loved being pregnant. Birth for me was, um, fun. Uh, it was a really exciting challenge that was invigorating, and I felt powerful. And so after that experience, I sort of felt bad saying that to people that I enjoyed birth. And I started realizing that maybe I should be a part of making that the case for other women also. Um, so that was my goal in becoming a doula, was to help other women have a positive birth experience, which sounds so obvious, but yeah, at the time that was kind of mind blowing. I was
Yeah,
waiting tables, and I feel like every pregnant person I saw, I wanted to just like explain how beautiful it could be.
right.
And I held back because I didn't want to be obnoxious. But I had learned about doulas in a sociology class, and I thought, well, let me just look into it and see what it's all about. The certification process is super easy, so I just went ahead and did it. And then the first birth I attended, I was hooked, and
Hmm.
yeah, so I guess that was in like 2009 is when I started doing those births.
That's amazing. And quickly after that, you decided to start doing family work, which is I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you did because that led us to get to talk to you today.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about forming the Birth Story Collective, like some of the ideas, who kind of thought of it, how did you guys come up with the structure, the framework, things like that.
Yeah, so in 2018 is when I mentioned I was seeing that burnout. The burnout was real for me. It was on the horizon. It was coming, and that was after I missed my grandma's funeral because it was out of town and I couldn't just leave a client pregnant. Um, so we knew each other. We lived in the neighborhood and knew each other, and technically we're competition. There were other birth photographers who could be hired by people. Um, Claire and I had backed each other up before. We had actually shared a client at one point because we had some travel plans, and that went really well. And then Claire had photographed Brittany's birth, and so that's how they knew each other. Um, so I was feeling this burnout and just started scouring the internet. Like, there's got to be another way to do this birth photography thing. And I couldn't really find anything, but I did find some wedding photographers in Australia who have a collective, and their structure is sort of what we copied. We have our own family business, so all of the maternity newborn family sessions we do separately, and then birth and Fresh 48 we share our clients. Um, and so that seemed like a good idea. So I reached out to them like, hey, do you guys want to talk about this? And we had coffee, and everyone loved the idea because everyone knows how hard it is to work alone. And so we just started working out details. Since then, we have done a few different iterations, so I definitely am aware that there's no one way to do it. It's whatever works for the group at the time. I do think that the structure of three people is really important for a collective because it gives you the opportunity to be off call completely.
Mhm.
we cycle through an on-call, second call, and then off-call. And if you only have two people, you don't really get that off-call ever.
Right. Yeah, that's so important to be able to have that downtime built in.
Yeah.
And I'm sure to be able to have emergency situations like funerals and things like that, to call on two other people to fill in for you is so important.
Yeah.
And also, how do you handle, like, do you guys all have similar styles or approaches to photography? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, and we've had lots of conversations over the years about this. You know, when somebody hires us, do they expect a style, and do we all need to use the same preset as a base or something like that? And we've played around with different ways of handling that. In general, we do shoot pretty similarly. We use similar lenses, you know, like 24 to 50. None of us use a flash, so that's really important to us. So you're not going to get a drastically different image out of the same lighting situation. And I think in general we shoot similarly, but we try to show our differences on the website so that hopefully someone realizes that there's going to be differences. I mean, it helps that we're shooting births, and so every lighting situation is going to be different. Yeah, but we're careful not to do some wildly different editing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have some cohesion between the three of you that you can offer to the client for stability. How do you define success within the collective?
I think success within the collective is feeling like we have a community, and a support system, and that we're in it fully together. You know, at one point early on, we had someone who wanted to hire two of us because only two of us had birthed at that point, and it was important to her that someone who had birthed attend her birth. And so that was a first kind of conversation to figure out what we're about. And we decided to say no, which, as you know, is hard to say to a birth client that you're available for technically. So yeah, that sense of community, I think, is how we define success. Beyond that, being financially viable is great. You know, we do charge more than most because we each make money off of each client. So the on-call people also get paid some. So we're more expensive.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. And I think that you guys, from what I can see online, you guys look like you're pretty sustainable, you're pretty busy, you're pretty successful. So congratulations in that aspect.
Thanks.
And pertaining to birth work, specifically, like, what keeps you motivated to keep going with this work?
I think the feeling I have every time I leave a birth, that high that I have before the crash, that memory is what keeps me going. It's just incredible. It's an incredible gift to be in the room when people are birthing, when a baby is born, when parents are becoming parents. It's just, there's nothing like it. And so I think that's what keeps me going.
Yeah. And you talk about like that high right before the crash. So I think we've all been there. Can you tell us a little bit about your self-care, like rituals or routines, something that you do for yourself after you've been at a long birth?
Yeah. First tenet of self-care is grace the next day and doing nothing. You know, we try to get a preview out to clients, you know, just a few shots pretty soon after. But beyond that, everything else, my workload just gets put to the back burner, and I sleep, but mostly just rest. That's the first piece. I think the second piece is I usually get a massage. You know, I have that in my mind at that late night birth that like I'm going to get a massage later on in the week.
Yeah.
Just the physical aspect of being at a birth only gets harder as I age. Like it takes a toll.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that you have, I'm assuming it kind of built into your pricing that you can like have things like massages and stuff like that. Yeah. So I want to switch to talking about your subscription-based family photography. What is subscription documentary family photography? Can you kind of give us a 101 outline of what that looks like?
Yeah, and first let me give a shout out to Lauren Webster because I bought her PDF about Year in the Life. So everything I have done since then was based on her work. She's amazing out of West Virginia. And I'm so thankful that I found her. So subscription photography is just what it sounds, a monthly fee that's automatically charged on a credit card and a set amount of sessions throughout the year. So for Year in the Life, that can be a monthly session every other month or seasonal. So 12, 6, or 4 sessions throughout the year. And then that includes an album at the end of the year.
Okay. And digital galleries throughout.
Exactly.
Okay, wonderful.
Yeah.
And how do you keep it interesting, like photographing the same family? I think I already know the answer to this, but throughout a full year, possibly throughout multiple years, how do you keep it spicy for yourself and for them?
I don't know, actually, that's not hard. Every single session is so different. Even I have some clients who will say like, oh, I'm sorry, every session this year has been at home. And I'm like, no, that is what this is about. It's about every day. So sometimes we'll go to a pumpkin patch. Sometimes, we do things that they would be doing anyway, out and about. But I love being at home with the same family. I think it's so interesting, especially, kids change so fast. So every session feels different.
And how do you articulate that to your clients, like through your marketing and things like that, that there is no maybe expectation of them to be more interesting each session?
Yeah, it's hard. I find myself reminding people who I've worked with for 3 years that, no, truly, we don't have to do anything, just saying it over and over again. I do have a list that I give people that is, activities that work all year. And it's a morning in the life, an evening in the life, playing in the backyard. It's very simple things in the hopes that they'll realize that they don't need to plan some elaborate event. And I do like it when families bring in something that's happening in their life anyway. So last year, one of my families got new kittens, right? And so mom just timed it around like bringing the kittens home while I was there. So that type of thing that was going to happen anyway in their life, but she just planned it so that I was there.
Right. And how does the communication, what does that look like with your clients throughout the year? Like, are you checking in on them? How are you scheduling these? How much goes into that?
A lot went into it on the front end, but now it's, I have an online calendar that's always available. People are welcome to sign up well in advance. Usually I'm sending out an email the month before their session to say, just remember to sign up. I do find that the monthly sessions are pretty tricky because it feels like I'm reminding them to sign up before I've even delivered this month's photos, so that does feel tedious sometimes. But with the every other month and the seasonal, it's just an email saying like, hey, time to sign up, and people grab their spot. And then a couple of days before our session, I say, where am I meeting you?
Right.
Yeah.
How does it break down number of sessions that you have that are like monthly versus quarterly, things like that? How does that break down?
You mean out of the clients I have?
Yes. Which is your more popular?
Yeah, it's pretty equal between the every other month and the seasonal. So the 6 sessions and the 4 sessions. I like the 6 sessions much better. It feels like we get into a flow. One of the amazing things about subscription photography for documentary is that the kids, it's so easy to ignore me because I just show up every once in a while and it's just like, not a big deal. I usually don't have to deal with the showing off and the, wanting to perform for me because I'm just there. So I like the every other month better. But I think, a lot of people prefer just the 4 sessions. It seems a little less daunting, maybe. Obviously, It's cheaper.
And how long do your sessions last?
I say 1 to 2 hours. But, if we're doing something really interesting, then it could go a little bit longer than that.
Yeah. And how do you stay present while you're photographing? Like, how do you stay embodied and focused and things like that when maybe things are kind of chaotic around you, or you're feeling that pressure of having to perform again?
Yeah. I always go back to my breath. My breath is very important to me. And I have a couple of families with 4 or 5 kids, and so it can get chaotic. And so I do find myself just planting my feet and taking a breath, because it's hard in that situation, especially, not to just be, spinning around shooting. I think back to early on watching Kirsten Lewis say that you're going to miss shots, and that's okay. I hear that all the time. Like, I'm going to miss shots. That's fine. Focus on this one and then move on to the next one.
Yeah. And is there a shot that you've lost that still haunts you?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I mean, there are so many.
I know.
I try to let go of them immediately because it's done.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. And the only thing that's coming to mind is not a family shot. I just was recently in West Virginia, and there were these birds on the wire, and there was this amazing shot. And I stood there for another 10 minutes hoping it would happen, and it didn't. So.
Right. Yeah. I have a very similar, we were driving across country one time, and we were in the southeast, and there was this bridge that we were driving over, and these people were getting baptized in the river at like golden hour through the trees. And I was like begging my husband to turn around, and he would not turn around. And that still like haunts me.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, that would have been such a beautiful moment to have.
Yeah. Occupational hazard. I mean, it just like, we miss so many shots all the time because life is so incredible.
Right. I think it speaks to how incredible life is that we miss as many as we all know we do, but we're still able to like capture what we capture and deliver what we deliver. So yeah, it's beautiful. And how are you marketing, or what is like your biggest tip for marketing subscription family documentary work?
Yeah. I mean, marketing's hard, as we all know. Word of mouth is actually how I've found most of my clients. Most of my Year in the Life families had already hired me, so they knew me. I will say, direct marketing is the best marketing. But when I started Year in the Life, I actually thought of a family that I would love to do this with. And I had already, posted about it and sent an email marketing. I'd already done the kind of the basics, but I reached out to her and said, hey, I'm starting this new project and I would love to do it with you guys. What do you think? And she replied back, oh my God, yes, I saw you post about that, but didn't realize it was actually time to sign up. I'm so glad you reached out. And for me, that was like, oh, once again, like, oh, right. We assume that we put things out into the world and everybody sees it. And so we're about to start our 4th year together, and I love working with that family. And I'm just so glad that I got the courage up to just reach out directly to her and say, I'd love to do this with you.
Yeah, I think that sometimes we also forget that people might not be reading the things the way that we think they're being said.
Yeah.
So I hear you on that. Just miscommunication or something like that, clarity wise.
Yeah. And a few of my clients since then have been referrals from her, right? So she's become that cheerleader for me that it's so much bigger than any marketing I could do.
Right. What is one piece of marketing, like in-person, word of mouth kind of marketing advice that you would give somebody that's just starting out?
I think it would be related to that, just reaching out to a client you like, or a family, so if you're just starting out as a photographer, I think reaching out to an interesting neighbor that, you want to photograph their life.
Yeah.
I remember early on, I went up to a pregnant woman in Home Depot who was gorgeous and her kids, and I could just tell that she would get documentary, she was just letting the kids be who they are. And so I just got over myself and asked her if I could photograph them sometime,
Wow.
you know.
And do you carry around like business cards or show them your Instagram? Like, how did that kind of unfold?
I think at that point I probably did have a business card for her. I don't really
Hmm.
remember on that one. We might have just exchanged phone numbers. I mean, this
Right.
was 2010, so funny that you say that. I've recently been asked for a business card a couple of times when I've been out shooting with families and didn't have any on me. So yeah, I feel like maybe business cards are making a comeback or something.
Right. Yeah, I was in a similar situation and somebody asked me for a business card, so I ordered a bunch and
Yeah.
still have not handed any out, but I'll have them for next
Right. Now
time.
they're in my bag. So
Yes. um yeah, so what kind of I'm kind of on an advice kick. I'm sorry to put you on the spot, but I'm sure we'll have a lot of listeners that are just finding this approach to photography and wanting to get started. So, if you can think back to when you started as a documentary photographer, what is one piece of advice that you would give somebody wanting to get into family work like this or birth work?
yeah, I think at first it was helpful for me to sort of offer both, to explain to people that we will get some nice portraits and then I'll just be a fly on the wall and sort of document your candid life. Um, I think some of that was my insecurity, actually, looking back on it, that trying to explain that, like, yeah, we'll do the real thing and then we'll do this other really awesome thing. So, I still do take portraits at sessions because I do think people want that. I want that when I'm having my family photographed. Um, but I think that was a helpful way of phrasing this documentary thing, because I think it also shows the contrast. Like, we will get a portrait, which is this, and then we will do this candid thing. I think that makes it more clear to people what you mean when you say documentary.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to make that distinction for the clients, but to help them kind of wrap their head around that they're two different things and
Mhm.
there will be time for each, or eventually maybe not. But I hear you on offering it every
Yeah.
session. Um, what does your process look like going into a session? Like, are you doing a lot of self care before sessions or a lot of preparation?
Yeah, that's a great question because, yeah, I am. I haven't really thought about explaining this to someone else about what I do, but I absolutely do breath work and stretching and some yoga before I go. I, I always do a power pose. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but
No.
it's just sort of standing in the world with power.
Mm, I love that.
Yeah, I do self affirmations, which now my 12-year-old helps out with. He's always like, "Bye, mom, you'll make amazing photos."
Oh, yeah.
Um, we all know that self-talk is so important, and so I like to give myself some of that positivity before walking into a session. Um, I pay attention to what I'm listening to on the way to a session. I think, my NPR is not going to help me feel creative or look for the connections in humanity, whereas like certain music will. Um,
Do
I
you
think
have like a pump up song that you like to listen to before you go or?
not specifically, and it's not always what one would think of as pump up. A lot of times it's actually calming down.
Mm,
And I love soul music, right? So it sort of reminds me of life and the point of what the work I'm doing.
yeah.
Which is connection and love and the meaning of it all.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And what is your go-to affirmation?
I think with regard to photography, it's that I'm an amazing photographer.
Yeah. And you are, Chanda. Like, I'm so thankful that you took the time to sit down with me today and have this conversation. Is there anything that I didn't ask that you would like to share?
I think a key piece of the subscription photography that maybe we
Hmm.
didn't touch on is that album
Oh,
at the
yes.
end.
Yes.
I even forget it as we go through the year. We're doing these 6 sessions throughout the year. But no, it's that album that is so fun to design and then deliver. That's what it's all about.
The album is critical to the whole thing. And how often, or they get one book each year?
Yes.
Okay. And what does that look like? Like, is it every image? Are you selecting images? Are they selecting images?
I give my clients the option. They can favorite their favorites in the gallery, the online gallery, and then I'll choose from there. That's another reason that I like the every other month sessions, because there are less to choose from. So trying to make one album with, 150 pages from 12 sessions is really hard.
Right.
You're looking at like 4 pages a session or, something crazy. So yeah, clients have the option, and some are like, you pick your favorites, and then others go through and like their favorites, and then I pick from there.
Wonderful. Yeah.
They pick their cover options, and then I just design it and deliver it to them.
And that's included in your subscription price?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not like an upsell. Do you upsell any products at all, or is it just digital and the album?
For the subscription, it's just the digital and the album. They do have the option of buying more albums. Nobody's ever taken me up on that, but that's there.
Yeah. And what does your birth look like? Do they get albums or products?
So same thing. They can add that on. Unfortunately, most people don't,
Right. Yeah. A sign of the times, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And it was a pleasure to speak with you. And you shared so many insightful things. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
So my website is my name. So it's www.chandawilliams.com. And on Instagram, it is Chanda_Williams.
Wonderful. I hope that everybody will take a moment today to look you up and see all the beautiful work that you're making. Yeah. Thank you so much, Chanda.
Thank you. I'm really excited about your podcast.
Thank you.